I went to the United States believing in the American dream. Hard work, respect, and a better life. For a long time, that was exactly what I found. Until the day everything changed. It was an ordinary day, in a public place, when a woman started screaming at me for no reason. In front of everyone, she pointed at me and said, "Go back to India." People stopped. Some stared. Others pretended not to see. In that moment, it wasn't just an insult. It felt like my entire journey there was being erased in seconds. But what she didn't know was that my story in that country was far greater than she could imagine. Caught between humiliation, silence, and judgmental stares, I had to decide, bow my head, or respond in a way no one expected. And the truth is, nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. My name is Vaidehi Rao, and until that day, I believed I had finally found my place in the world. I wasn't born in the United States. I came from Hyderabad, India, with a suitcase full of simple clothes, and a head full of dreams too big to fit inside that 16-hour flight. I remember it like it was yesterday. My mother holding my hand at the airport, trying to smile. But her eyes gave everything away. My father silent, just nodding slowly as if telling me, "Go. But don't forget who you are." And I went. Because growing up in India taught me two things very early. That the world out there was full of opportunity, and that you had to be twice as good just to be noticed. When I arrived in the United States, nothing was easy. My accent revealed where I came from before I could even finish a sentence. People asked where I was from, and I always felt it wasn't just curiosity. It was judgment. But I endured. I worked jobs nobody wanted, studied at night while fighting exhaustion and homesickness, learned to smile even when I didn't understand the jokes, and to stay quiet when someone said something that didn't feel right, but I didn't know how to respond. With time, things started to change. I landed a good job, started earning my own money, rented my own apartment, and for the first time I felt something I had never before. Independence. I began to believe I had made it, that all the effort, all the sleepless nights, all the times I felt out of place, had been worth it. Until that day. It was an ordinary afternoon. I had left work early and decided to stop at a grocery store near home. Nothing special, just needed a few simple things, milk, bread, some fruit. Normal things, the kind anyone does without thinking. I was walking through the aisles, distracted, comparing prices, when I heard a loud voice behind me. At first I ignored it. I thought it was just someone talking loudly on their phone, but then I heard something that made my entire body freeze. "You people are everywhere, aren't you?" I froze. Not because I fully understood in that moment, but because something in the tone of that voice made me feel exposed. Slowly I turned around. There was a woman staring at me. She didn't look like she was joking. She didn't look confused. She looked angry, in a way I couldn't make sense of. "Excuse me?" I said, trying to stay calm. She took a step closer. "You people, Indians, you're everywhere." Some people started looking. That quick, curious kind of glance that appears when something unusual is happening. My heart began to race. I had been in uncomfortable situations before, but never like this. Never in public, never with someone speaking loudly enough to draw everyone's attention. I took a deep breath. "I'm just shopping," I replied, trying to end it there. But she didn't want to end it. In fact, it seemed like she was just getting started. "If life is so great in your country," she continued louder now, "why are you here?" And it was in that moment that the entire store went silent. Or at least that's how it felt to me, because suddenly I couldn't hear anything. Not the carts rolling by, not the background conversations, not the soft music playing through the speakers. Just that phrase, "Why are you here?" And for a second, I didn't know how to answer. Not because I had no answer, but because none felt like enough. I thought of my mother, my father, the nights I studied until I couldn't anymore, the jobs I took just to survive. I thought of everything, and still, I said nothing. The people around me began watching more openly. Some looked uncomfortable, others just curious, and that was when she said the words I will never forget. She pointed at me, in front of everyone, and shouted, "Then go back to India." My entire body froze, as if time had stopped. Nobody spoke, nobody moved, and in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just shame, it wasn't just anger. It was something deeper. It was as if, for a few seconds, everything I had built in that country had been reduced to a single thing, where I came from. I could have simply walked away, grabbed my things, ignored it, pretended it had nothing to do with me. It would have been easier, it would have been safer. It was what the old Vaidehi would have done. The one who avoided conflict, who preferred silence, who accepted, and moved on. But something inside me, that day, changed. Maybe it was the way she spoke. Maybe it was the stares around me. Or maybe everything I had swallowed in silence up until then. I don't know. But I know what happened next. I took a deep breath and looked directly into her eyes. And for the first time, I decided I was not going to stay silent. My heart was still racing, but something inside me had shifted. It wasn't just nerves anymore. It was resolve. For the first time since I had arrived in the United States, I didn't want to avoid the situation. I wanted to respond. I looked directly at her, without looking away, without lowering my head, and said in the firmest voice I could manage, "I'm here for the same reason millions of other people are." She frowned as if she hadn't expected me to speak. "I came to study, to work, to build my life." Honestly, some people started paying closer attention. I could feel the stares now, and they were no longer just curious. They were watching. "I pay my taxes, I work every day. I'm not taking anything from anyone." She laughed. But it wasn't a light laugh. It was heavy with contempt. "Oh yeah? Then why does it seem like you people are everywhere?" she said, raising her voice again. That could have made me back down, but it didn't, because in that moment, I realized something important. It didn't matter what I said. She had already decided who I was. But even so, I kept going. Maybe because we work hard. Silence. For a second, she said nothing, and I felt that something had shifted. Small, but enough. But then she stepped closer. Too close. "You think that gives you the right to be here?" she said, pointing her finger at me. My body reacted instinctively. One step back, not out of fear, but out of instinct. I looked around. People were watching, some clearly uncomfortable, others still doing nothing. And that was when I understood something I had never understood so clearly before. No one was going to save me from this situation. If anything was going to change, it had to start with me. I took one more deep breath and said something I didn't even know I had stored inside me. "I don't need your permission to exist here." The atmosphere shifted, subtly but unmistakably. Some people exchanged glances. An older woman across the aisle gave a small, slow nod, and for the first time, her expression changed. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was surprise, as if this wasn't part of her script. But she didn't back down. If anything, she became even more aggressive. "You should go back to where you came from," she repeated, nearly shouting. And it was in that moment that something unexpected happened. A voice behind me said, "Hey, this has gone too far." I turned around. A man, probably in his 40s, was staring directly at her. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look hesitant. He looked steady. She didn't do anything wrong. The woman turned to him, irritated. "This is none of your business." "It is now," he replied without raising his voice. And suddenly, the whole scene shifted. It was no longer just me. Other people started moving. A store employee appeared nearby. Another customer stopped their cart beside us. The tension rose, but strangely I felt calmer, because for the first time since everything began, I wasn't alone. The woman looked around, noticed the stares, noticed that the attention was no longer just on me. It was on her, and that clearly unsettled her. "You're all the same, always defending each other." But nobody responded. And the silence this time wasn't fear, it was judgment. She was being watched, and she knew it. It was then that the employee finally spoke. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down." "I am calm," she snapped. "You don't seem it." The employee replied firmly, and in that moment, for the first time, I saw doubt cross her face. Small, quick, but it was there, as if she was beginning to realize she had gone too far. But what happened next, no one there expected. She looked at me again, and this time it wasn't just anger. It was something mixed, frustration, wounded pride, and maybe, just maybe, a loss of control. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" That caught me off guard, because that was never it. But I understood. In her mind, this wasn't just about me. It was about something bigger. Something she had been carrying long before she ever saw me. And I had a choice there. I could respond with anger, fight back, turn it into something even bigger. But I didn't. No, I just want to live my life in peace, silence. But it didn't last, because in the distance, a sound began to grow. First low, then clearer. A siren. Someone had called the police. And suddenly, everything became much more serious. She noticed, too. I could see the confidence beginning to drain from her face. She stepped back, then again, looking around as if calculating some way out. But it was too late. The automatic doors of the store slid open, and 2 police officers walked in. The sound of the siren was still echoing in my head when the 2 officers entered. Everything seemed to slow down. The automatic doors opening, the sound of footsteps, eyes turning in the same direction. And suddenly, what had felt like just an uncomfortable moment became something very serious. The woman, who just seconds ago had been shouting with such confidence, was different now. Her shoulders tense, her gaze restless, her breathing heavier. She looked around as if searching for a way to leave without being noticed, but it was too late. One of the officers approached first. "Good afternoon." "What's going on here?" That strange kind of silence, where everyone knows what happened but nobody wants to be the first to speak. I felt my heart speed up again. It wasn't fear of the police, it was the weight of the moment. Because suddenly, this was no longer just between her and me. Now there were consequences. The man who had defended me earlier stepped forward. She was screaming at this woman here. The officer looked at me, then at her. "Is that true, ma'am?" She crossed her arms, defensive. "I was just talking." Talking. That word hit me in a strange way, because it wasn't a conversation, it never was. But I still hadn't spoken. And for a second I thought about staying quiet. I thought about letting it end there, without more exposure, without more tension. But then I remembered. The phrase, the pointed finger, the stares around me, the feeling of being diminished in public, and I understood something very clearly in that moment. If I stayed silent now, it would be like saying what happened was normal, and it wasn't. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. She was telling me to go back to my country. I said, my voice steadier than I expected. The officer nodded slowly. "Anything else?" I hesitated for a second, then continued. "Sish." She raised her voice and pointed at me in front of everyone. The officer turned back to her. His look different now, more serious. "Mom, is that true?" She didn't answer right away, and that silence said far more than any words could. "I just said what everyone thinks," she finally snapped. And in that instant, the atmosphere changed for good, because now it wasn't just a dispute, it was an admission. I saw the other officer exchange a quick look with the first, the employee move closer, some people beginning to murmur softly, but enough to be felt. She noticed too, and for the first time since it all started, she looked lost. "Ma'am," the officer said calmly, "we're going to need you to come outside with us." "What? I didn't do anything." But her voice no longer had the same force. "Let's talk outside, all right." She looked around, searching for support. She found none. Nobody spoke, nobody defended her, and that perhaps was what shook her most, because minutes ago she had been the loudest person in the room. Now, she was the most isolated. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, even so beginning to walk, the officers at her side, her head slightly lowered, and as she passed by me, our eyes met. For a second, just 1 second, but it was enough. Because that look was no longer anger, no longer arrogance. It was something quieter, something heavier, as if in that moment she had realized she had crossed a line and that there was no going back. She left. The doors closed and the store exhaled, but I was still standing there, motionless, processing everything, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline, from everything that had happened so fast. And suddenly I felt something unexpected. It wasn't relief, not entirely. It was a mixture. Relief at no longer being in that situation, exhaustion from having gone through it, and something deeper, a kind of silent question inside me. Was it worth it? Because in the end, I was still there, in the same place with the same people around me, but feeling different. The man who had defended me came over. "Are you okay?" "I am, thank you." He smiled softly. "You handled that really well." I didn't know what to say because on the inside it didn't feel that simple. People returned to their routines. Carts started rolling again. Conversations resumed. The background music came back as if nothing had happened. But for me, everything had changed, because that moment wasn't just about an argument. It was about something I had been carrying for a long time without realizing it. And as I walked back through the aisles, picking up the items I still needed, a quiet certainty began to grow inside me. It hadn't ended there, because sometimes what happens in public is only the beginning of something much greater on the inside. I finished my shopping, but I don't remember exactly how. My body was in the store, but my mind was still stuck in that moment, in her voice, in the phrase, in the stares. I went through the checkout, paid, thanked the cashier automatically, and walked out. When the doors opened, the outside air hit my face, cool, quiet. But inside I was still turbulent. I walked to my car with slow steps, unlocked it, sat down, closed the door, and it was only there, alone, that everything came at. I gripped the steering wheel and took a deep breath, but it didn't help. My eyes filled with tears. It wasn't just about what had happened that day. If it had only been that, maybe I could have shaken it off. But it was as if that phrase had opened a door inside me, a door I had spent years trying to keep closed. Go back to India. That wasn't new. Not really. Maybe it had never been said so loudly, so directly. But in other ways I had felt it before. In small things, the way some people changed their tone when they spoke to me, in the jokes that seemed harmless but weren't. In the repeated questions, "Where are you from?" "No, but where are you really from?" And for a long time I accepted it, because I told myself, this is normal, it's not personal, you're overreacting. But that day I couldn't pretend, because when someone looks at you in front of everyone and tells you that you don't belong, there's no way to ignore it. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. And suddenly I was no longer there. I was back in India, in my mother's kitchen. The smell of fresh chai in the air, the sound of the pot on the stove, her voice calling me, Vaidehi, come eat before it gets cold. I almost heard it. Almost. And that hurt. Because for a second, I asked myself something I had never had the courage to ask. Did I make the right choice? I had come to the United States with a clear purpose. To grow, to achieve, to build something greater. And I really had. But at what cost? How many times had I stayed silent when I should have spoken? How many times had I swallowed something just to avoid conflict? How many times had I tried to fit into a place that maybe was never fully mine? I opened my eyes and looked at my hands on the steering wheel, and I realized something that unsettled me a little. I was tired, not of work, not of routine, but of this constant effort to prove something, to prove that I deserved to be there, that I was enough, that I wasn't less. And the strangest part? Nobody had ever directly asked that of me, but somehow I felt like I had to. I started the car, but didn't pull away immediately. I sat there still thinking, until my phone vibrated. It was a message from my mother, simple as always. Have you eaten? I laughed, even with my eyes still wet. It was remarkable. From the other side of the world, she still knew exactly when to ask. I took a deep breath and replied, Yes, Mom, I've eaten. A lie. But it was never about the food. It never was. She replied almost instantly, Take care of yourself, and remember, you are strong. I sat looking at that message for a few seconds. I had heard it so many times before, but in that moment, it felt different, heavier, more real, because being strong wasn't just about enduring, wasn't just about pushing forward. Maybe it was also about knowing when to stop accepting certain things. I leaned my head back once more, but this time there was no confusion. There was clarity. For the first time since I had arrived in the United States, I wasn't thinking about how to adapt. I was thinking about how to respect myself. And that changed everything, because in that moment, I understood something nobody had taught me when I left India. You can cross oceans, you can change countries, you can build an entire life somewhere else. But if you don't stand up for yourself, the world will decide for you where your place is. And that day, in the middle of a grocery store, someone tried to decide that for me, but she didn't succeed. Because for the first time, I didn't stay silent, and that was only the beginning. That night, I barely slept, not out of fear, but because my mind wouldn't stop. The scene kept replaying over and over, her voice, the stares, my response. And for the first time, I wasn't thinking about what I should have said. I was thinking about what I had finally said. That made all the difference. I woke up earlier than usual. The alarm never even went. I lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling in silence, feeling something strange, as if that day was going to be different. And in a way, it was. I got ready, grabbed my things, and went to work. The commute looked the same. The streets, the traffic, the people. But I wasn't the same. Something inside me had changed, and I was still trying to understand exactly what. When I got to the office, I noticed something almost immediately. People were looking at me, not in a negative way, but differently, more attentively. I greeted some colleagues, sat at my desk, turned on my computer, and tried to carry on as normal. But it didn't take long. Vaidehi, can you come here for a minute? It was my manager. I took a deep breath, not because I had done something wrong, but because after the day before, everything felt bigger than it actually was. I went to her office. She closed the door, and for a second I thought, could this be about yesterday? But how? I hadn't told anyone. Are you okay? She asked, direct, no preamble. I am. Yes. She tilted her head slightly, as if weighing my answer. Are you sure? And it was in that moment that I realized she knew, or at least had some idea. Why? I asked. She turned her monitor to face me, and when I saw it, my stomach dropped. It was a video, recorded in the store. Me, the woman, the argument, all of it. Someone had filmed it and posted it. I felt my face flush. It started circulating this morning, she said carefully. I didn't know what to feel. Shame, exposure, anger, maybe a little of everything. Because suddenly this was no longer just a moment between a few people. Now it was public. I didn't know, I murmured. I figured. I just wanted to check if you were okay. And if you needed any support. The way she said it, without judgment, without pressure, made me relax a little. Thank you. I'm still trying to process everything. She smiled gently. I know it's not easy, but I want you to know something. She paused for a moment. You handled that with a lot of dignity. That got to me, because until then, I hadn't thought of it that way. I had only felt it, but hearing it from someone outside changed the way I saw what had happened. When I left her office, my phone started vibrating. One message, then another, then many. It was a group of colleagues. Links, comments, people talking about the video. Some outraged at the woman, others praising my composure, others sharing similar stories. I scrolled slowly, and I noticed something I hadn't expected. Stories from other people started appearing. This happened to me too. I went through something similar. Thank you for not staying silent. That moved me, because until that moment I had seen it as something personal, something that happened to me. But it wasn't just that. It was bigger, much bigger. It was something many people carried in silence, and without meaning to, I had given it a voice. I sat down at my desk, looked around, and felt something new. It wasn't just strength, it was purpose, still small, still taking shape, but real. Because in that moment, I understood something important. Sometimes you don't choose the moment, but you choose what you do with it. And that moment, which had started with a painful phrase, was now turning into something different, something I still couldn't fully name. But that no longer felt as heavy as before. I took a deep breath, and for the first time since all of it, I didn't feel like forgetting. I felt like remembering, because that said something about me, about the world, and about who I wanted to be from then on. In the days that followed, the video kept circulating more than I had imagined. People I had never seen started commenting, messages arriving from different places, stories being shared, some similar to mine, others even harder. And the more I read, the clearer one thing became. This was never just about me. It was about something many people feel, but almost nobody talks about. At first, I thought about stepping back, staying quiet, waiting for it to pass, returning to my routine as if nothing had happened. It would have been easier, but it didn't feel right. Because every time I remembered that moment in the store, I didn't only remember the pain, I remembered the choice. That second when I could have lowered my head and didn't. A few days later, I was home, sitting on the couch, scrolling through messages on my phone, when I got an unexpected notification, an unknown number. I hesitated for a second, but opened it. The message was short. Hi, I was there that day. I didn't say anything. And it's been on my mind ever since. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry I didn't help, but you were very brave. I stayed looking at that message for a while, because it said a lot, not just about that person, but about everyone else who had been there, watching and silent. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry about that. I understood. Not everyone knows how to react. Not everyone finds the courage in the moment. But that doesn't mean they don't feel it. I replied, thank you for saying that. Sometimes, just acknowledging it makes a difference. I set the phone down and sat there, in silence, thinking. Because at the heart of it, that story wasn't about winning an argument, wasn't about proving I was right. It was about something much simpler, and at the same time much harder. Respect. Respect for who you are, for your story, for your place in the world. That evening, I called my mother. I had been wanting to tell her for days, but hadn't found the words yet. Mom, I began, and she knew immediately. What happened, Vaidehi? I took a deep breath and told her everything, from beginning to end. The store, the woman, the phrase, the police. There was silence on the other end, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was the silence of someone feeling it alongside you. Are you okay? She asked, her voice softer. I am. I think more than before. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said something I will never forget. My daughter, the world will test you in many ways, but never let anyone make you forget who you are. My eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from certainty, because in that moment everything made sense. I hadn't gone to the United States just to work. It wasn't just for the money or just for the career. I went to grow. And growing sometimes hurts. Sometimes it puts you in situations you never imagined, forces you to stand up for yourself when all you wanted was peace. But it also shows you who you really are. The following week, I went back to the same store. I could have avoided it, chosen another place, another route. But I didn't want to, because I didn't want that place to be defined by that moment. I walked in, took a deep breath, grabbed a cart, and started moving through the aisles, this time with a different posture. Not defiance, not anger, but present. I was there, and I knew it. I passed through the same aisle where it had all happened, paused for a second, looked around. Everything seemed normal, as if nothing had ever occurred. And in a way, that was true. The world doesn't stop, people move on, routines continue. But inside us, some things change forever. I kept walking, picked up my groceries, went to the checkout, and as I was leaving, a woman caught my eye and smiled. Simple, without a word, but enough. I smiled back and kept going, because in the end, I understood something I wish more people could understand too. You can't control what others say, can't control how they act, or what they think, but you control who you choose to be in the face of it. And that day, when someone tried to diminish me, I discovered something no one can ever take from me, my voice. And once you use it, you never go back to being the same.